The creator of Bojack Horseman has a new show. This show, titled Long Story Short, was kind of brushed aside and overlooked by viewers when it first came out. But I honestly think it's worth mentioning that this show has some of the most well-written and realistic depictions of people I've seen in a long time, especially in an often underutilized medium like animation. The characters all have developments we see form in the multiple back and forths between timelines, which also have the purpose of explaining their dynamics with each other, their behavior, and the directions they take on in life. So I wanted to take a look at how this is achieved from a writing standpoint, both in Waxberg's current work on Long Story Short, and in his previous work on Bojack Horseman. To start off, both these stories form themselves almost entirely around characters, and create a defined story through the growing and changing conflicts between these characters, with a particular focus on why these characters may behave in the ways they do. We see this in the later seasons of Bojack and kind of in the entirety of Long Story Short. This style of writing is very character first, and its effectiveness on the audience comes from its ability to depict realistic and relatable people that reflect real individuals in our own lives. In Waxberg's work, he specifically creates focus on where these behaviors come from and how they can affect families, individuals, and the legacy we leave behind. And this brings me to what I believe is the tool that can break down and build up the ability to write these kinds of very human characters. The enneagram is a theoretical model of the human psyche, which consists of 9 interconnected personality types. Basically, it's the theory that we can break down all individuals to one of 9 types, all who have their own behaviors and dynamics, which stem from needs or fears they unconsciously have. And I have yet to see a writer apply these Enneagram types to their characters better than Waxberg. To preface, the Enneagram is a much more complex and interesting way to psychoanalyze people and why we each behave the way we do, but for the sake of this video and its topic, I'm just gonna break down the 9 types to the very basic fundamental things that make them each up. All types are neutral and can be good or bad, but their core traits all stem from a person's attempt to fill in the needs they did not have met at some point in their life. So we all have a type, but all types have healthy and unhealthy forms. If you want to see a video that actually does justice to a better breakdown of the 9 types, please check out Local Scriptman's videos on them. They're really good. To start off, the type 9 is part of what's called the gut types. These types are very focused on the need to feel safe and physically stable, with a large focus on more primal or instinctual needs. The type 9's complex is in its passiveness. These types avoid confrontation or conflict even when put in uncomfortable situations or when they're upset, because they feel a stronger sense of safety in preserving where they are now as opposed to fighting or expressing their own needs. They also are known to be extremely good mediators and have the potential to be good listeners and friendly with a focus on harmony. After this, we have the type 8, which is also a gut type, but the 8 is very confrontational and direct, taking power and control over people to feel safe and secure, but primarily neglecting their own vulnerability for the sake of their image of strength and stability. Now we get into the type 7, which is one of the head types. This type has a strong focus on a desire to escape mental pain and avoid their own feelings. The 7 specifically has a very direct focus on escapism through a constant need for new and disposable stimulation, such as fleeting relationships, impulsive decisions, substances, and bad impulse control or reliability. They do, however, have really good social abilities when it comes to being able to have freedom and have an ability to make decisions for oneself. The 6 and 5 both also desire this mental escapism, though the 6 seeks it in social and structural things such as communities, social purpose, and loyalty, while the 5 is often much more internal, creating categorical and logical understandings of what they want to understand to make sense of it. The 4, along with the 3 and 2, are the heart types. These 3 all have the basic need and desire for love. The Force seeks love through dramatizing and internalizing its own suffering or sense of self in the hopes of receiving attention or someone who genuinely understands them, though this often leaves them making themselves more miserable for the sake of romanticizing misery itself into their identity. Now, the 3 seeks this love through approval and accomplishment. It has the desire to amount to something to prove its worth. As opposed to the 4's yearning for a savior, the 3 pushes to make its own love through getting that medal and hearing applause. The 2 is essentially your narcissistic maternal figure. They desire love and seek it out through an inevitably disappointing cycle of giving too much, especially when it is not wanted, and then expecting gratitude when there was no need for the excessive efforts in the first place. This often becomes a pattern of selfish behavior disguised as favors that then leave the 2 resentful of those who do not reciprocate to their standards. And finally, the 1 circles back to the gut type with a strong focus on a need for stability through doing what is strictly to one's idea of moral rightness. This leaves them stubborn and often judgmental of anything diverting from their own ways. And would you look at that, we are out of numbers. So writers use the enneagram to achieve good character structure and essentially build nuanced, believable characters. Each type represents a core motivation, fear, and desire, which influences how a character thinks, reacts, grows, and regresses. It's especially useful for writing how characters change under stress or develop through personal growth. Again, the Enneagram is very much a neutral assessment of ourselves, so there are unhealthy and healthy sides to each type, and although a person's type tends to stay the same, how healthily they embody their type can dramatically change through growth or regression. Now back to Waxberg's shows, let's apply this to the character writing in Bojack Horseman, a show rich in psychological depth where many characters can be mapped into Enneagram types. I think the best example of this is in Bojack and his foil Mr. Peanut Butter. Now, the Enneagram is interpretable and how one person types a character may differ from another, but I think it's most accurate to say that Bojack is an unhealthy type 7, and Mr. Peanut Butter is a somewhat unhealthy type 2. Bojack's internal needs come from a desire to escape anything and everything, including responsibility, guilt, and his own self-loathing, which tends to come out in the form of alcoholism, quick thrills, more alcoholism, and a self-absorbed nature to avoid thinking too hard about anything or anyone else. But at his core, he is driven by a fear of stuckness and being unwanted, which he experienced as a child, so he ends up using performance as an escapism. The clearest example of all these traits in Bojack can be seen in these episodes. Then we have Mr. Peanut Butter, who comes across as a clear type 2. Mr. Peanut Butter's complex is his ego, which manifests itself in a relentless need to bring joy to others, even when it isn't welcome, because internally, he does this for himself to fulfill his own desire to be helpful. This is especially prevalent in his relationship with Diane. Now, these behaviors of theirs are both established clearly as repetitive problems, whether self-destructive or just selfish. Both of them have been written with clear needs that motivate their actions, which come out as flawed because they stem from those insecurities. And when they interact, especially in later seasons, we begin to see how the dynamics of the Enneagram create a sort of cheat code to good character writing. To further this point, let's look at Long Story Short, a series that, as far as the first season has shown, centers around the relationships and dynamics between a family, while also feeding us these breadcrumbs to piece together why characters may have the behaviors they do within this family. A character that is almost overlooked in this series is the family's father, Elliot. I wanted to mention him firstly because it is exactly this passive characterization of him that encapsulates the most important aspect of the story, the dynamics between characters, and in Elliot's case, his dynamic with his wife, Sheila. Elliot's life before his marriage isn't touched on in season 1, however, his personality easily reflects that of a type 9. He is agreeable, avoidant of conflict, and often will quietly resolve issues for the sake of peace, rather than directly tackling their sources for the sake of a greater change. Now, this in itself does not hold much value until we look at Sheila. Sheila is, from what I take from her, possibly the most realistic and well-executed example of an unhealthy Type 2 character I have seen in a long time. She loves hard and develops these obsessive and smothering behaviors because of this. As we see how her children grow and change, Sheila is still stuck in a state of obsession with receiving attention, often feeling resentful or holding grudges because when at its worst, the two mindset falls into the belief that nobody but the two themselves is trying as hard to be a loving provider. She forces love even through lies and manipulation, such as when she makes the excuse that her youngest son has an addiction problem and needs an intervention just so her family will come stay over for her anniversary. It is in so many ways reflective of many people's real mothers and the unintentional narcissistic tendencies they may have. Sheila is unable to take any criticism because she sees it as a threat to her mission of being the best host, the best mother, the best helper. She is incredibly pushy and forceful of her beliefs and ideas, as we see when Yoshi tells her about his religious practices, so she forces him to eat non-kosher cake. This all can be ultimately traced back, however, to a level of understanding. She is constantly in need of attention because she found it impossible to get, with her having to create extreme situations to make people pay attention to her. I love how they depict this because similarly to Bojack Horseman's style of writing, we get shown her behavior and then only later do we have an explanation of where this behavior originates. The need for control she has and where it comes from is entirely explained in just one brief scene, being the only scene we have so far in the show of her childhood. It depicts something very clear and also extremely realistic for many people who have the behavioral patterns that Sheila falls into. She grew up learning that unless she did something excessive, she would not get the attention or love she needed, and that unless she got people's attention, she would be ignored and therefore unloved. So we finally piece together the puzzle through this scene that even in a seemingly loving household, Sheila felt that love was something she had to hold on to and force out of others, becoming obsessive of attention and others' affection, even to the detriment of her relationships. And this gives the audience a new perspective on her behavior, while also not completely neglecting how she has ultimately caused a lot of stress and pain in her family. I like that she is still, at the end of the day, a mother who loves her kids, a good parent, and a loving wife. She's given depth and complexity that goes beyond her core issues and how that shapes her. And furthermore, I think it's incredibly interesting to look at how her dynamic with her husband make total sense for their respective character types. If Sheila's sense of security in being loved comes out in the form of obsessive control, then it makes sense that her husband's radical acceptance of this is why they are together. I particularly like how this is shown in their interactions on the intervention episode. While Elliot is generally more interested in diverting issues towards ignoring them in favor of anything else, like with his running hot tub gag, he can rely on Sheila to directly confront issues, which we see clearly when Yoshi gets his first job selling mattresses. It's just really well thought out, and I like how they seem to apply this to almost every major character in the family. So, what's my point with all this? Well, I think it's worth analyzing writing in a visual media in the context of characters and dynamics. And when we can find tools that work, like how it has been applied to the writing in Waxberg's shows, we can take this and apply it to our own stories, which is why I honestly really do think the enneagram is one of the keys to great character writing, and I encourage all writers to take some level of inspiration from it. I'm probably gonna do more videos on the show one day, but for now I mostly didn't want to get too deep into it because it's still pretty fresh and I encourage people to give it a go. But I hoped you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of my stuff or support my work, check out my Patreon where you can find behind the scenes content for these videos, extra comics, and other work I do on my Instagram. Thank you for watching.